6,000 Finnish snipers eliminate 500,000 Soviet soldiers in 105 days, a casualty ratio so catastrophic that it convinces Adolf Hitler the Red Army is weak and directly leads to his decision to invade the Soviet Union. The Winter War is the most one-sided military massacre in modern history, and it starts with a farmer packing snow into his mouth to hide his breath before he pulls the trigger. But before the elimination begins, there is a lie. On November 26, 1939, 7 mortar shells detonated near the Soviet village of Mainila. The explosions ripple through the snow-covered ground, sending plumes of frozen earth into the twilight air. Moscow immediately accuses Finnish artillery of ending the lives of 4 border guards. The claim is a fabrication, engineered by the NKVD under the supervision of Artillery Marshal Grigory Kulik to provide a justification for war. Finnish border guards, observing from 800 meters away, watch. The shells explode from within Soviet territory. Their calls for investigation are ignored. The Kremlin tears up the non-aggression pact. 4 days later, the sky above Helsinki darkens. It is not winter storm clouds that blot out the pale morning sun, but the wings of the Soviet air force. Incendiary bombs tumble from the bellies of twin-engine bombers, shrieking toward the civilian population below. The explosions rip through apartment blocks and marketplaces, igniting timber structures like matchsticks. Roughly 100 people perish in the opening salvo, their bodies scattered across cobblestone streets, now slick with blood and melting snow. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov broadcasts a lie so obscene it will become legend. The planes, he claims, are dropping humanitarian food supplies, bread baskets for starving workers. Within weeks, Finnish soldiers will scream a different name for those cluster bombs as they rip through their lines. On the ground, the disparity is mathematical elimination. The Red Army mobilizes a colossal invasion force across the 1,100-kilometer border. 21 divisions surge forward, totaling 450,000 men initially, eventually swelling to nearly 1 million troops. They are supported by 2,500 tanks and 3,880 aircraft. The Soviet strategy, dictated by Chief of Staff Boris Shaposhnikov and Leningrad Military District Commander Kirill Meretskov, relies on the sheer weight of material to crush the Finns within 2 weeks. Facing this steel avalanche is a Finnish force of roughly 300,000 men, mostly reservists armed with bolt-action rifles from the previous World War. They possess only 32 tanks and 114 combat-ready aircraft. The math does not favor survival. But what the Soviets do not know is that numbers mean nothing in a forest that refuses to be conquered. The Finnish defensive doctrine is predicated on the geography of the Karelian Isthmus and the vast roadless wilderness to the north. As the Red Army's 7th Army slams into the Karelian Isthmus, attempting a mechanized advance, they find their columns canalized into narrow corridors by dense forests and marshes. The tanks designed to dominate open steppes are blind in the timber. The Soviet command, hollowed out by Stalin's Great Purge, which liquidated 36,761 officers, including 3 of 5 marshals, fails to account for the terrain that will become their graveyard. In the north, Finnish units under commanders like Wiljo Tuompo execute a delaying action. As the Soviet columns advance, Finnish border guards and reservists initiate a scorched earth policy. Villages are set ablaze, denying the invaders shelter against the encroaching sub-zero temperatures. The smell of burning timber fills the air, mixing with the acrid stench of diesel exhaust from Soviet trucks grinding through the snow. The Finns retreat, not in panic, but with grim purpose, drawing the lumbering Soviet divisions deep into a logistical nightmare where the cold will become a weapon equal to any rifle. General Mannerheim, recognizing the impossibility of a static defense against such overwhelming numbers, issues a command that will define the war's brutality. The Finnish army will not stand and fight on the border. They will vanish into the forests and the fortified Mannerheim line, effectively inviting the Red Army to march into a trap from which there will be no return. The Soviets cross the border, expecting a parade. They are walking into a tomb. As December 1939 dawns, the thermometer plummets. Temperatures on the Karelian Isthmus eventually reach a record low of -43 degrees Celsius, -45 degrees Fahrenheit. The cold is not just uncomfortable, it is a living entity, gnawing through layers of wool and leather, freezing moisture in nostrils, turning breath into clouds of ice crystals. This climatic shift exposes the fatal flaw in Soviet preparation: hubris. The Red Army troops, many drawn from warmer southern regions like Ukraine, march into Finland wearing standard olive drab uniforms that stand out like ink on parchment against the snow. They lack white camouflage, ski training, and winter lubricants for their weapons. Frostbite spreads through the ranks like plague. Fingers turn black. Rifles jam. Bolts frozen solid by condensation that crystallizes in the firing mechanisms. The Finnish soldier, by contrast, is master of this environment. Dressed in layered wool and white snow capes, they are invisible to the enemy. Their mobility is secured by cross-country skis, allowing them to traverse the deep forests that imprison the road-bound Soviet columns. The psychological backbone of the Finnish defense is sisu, an untranslatable cultural construct denoting stoic determination and guts in the face of impossible odds. It is the refusal to yield even when logic demands surrender. The instrument of the Finnish resistance is the Mosin Nagant rifle. The Finnish rifle is not faster, it is not more powerful, but in the hands of a hunter who knows these woods, it never misses. The Soviets are about to learn this the hard way. While the Soviets mass-produce the M1891/30, the Finns utilize the Civil Guard variant, the Seiko M28/30, nicknamed Pistikorva, the Spitz. This weapon features a heavier barrel and superior iron sights compared to its Soviet counterpart. It is a tool of precision, and in the hands of hunters turned soldiers, it becomes legendary. Among those mobilizing is a farmer who will eliminate 500 men in 100 days. His name is Simo Häyhä, and he is packing snow into his mouth. Standing only 5 feet 3 inches, Häyhä is a champion marksman of the Civil Guard. He packs his M28/30, eschewing the telescopic sights that Soviet snipers rely upon. Häyhä knows that scopes force a shooter to raise their head higher, exposing them to enemy fire, and are prone to fogging in the extreme cold. He also knows that the glint of sunlight on a lens can betray a position. His preparation is meticulous. He packs snow mounds around his firing positions to dampen the muzzle blast. He keeps snow in his mouth to prevent his breath from steaming in the frigid air, a ghostly discipline that will make him invisible. If you're not already subscribed, hit that button now, because what happens next is the most one-sided military disaster you've never heard of. While the Finns hone their individual fieldcraft, the Soviet 44th Rifle Division, an elite unit equipped with heavy armor and artillery, begins its march along the Raate Road towards Suomussalmi. Their objective is to cut Finland in half at its narrowest point. The commanders of the 44th, confident in their 14,000 troops and dozens of tanks, bring marching bands and dress uniforms, anticipating a victory parade in Oulu. They advance in a single-file column, stretching over 30 kilometers, engines roaring, tracks grinding through the snow-packed road. The vanguard reports an eerie silence. The woods seem empty. They do not know that Colonel Hjalmar Silasvuo has already deployed his outnumbered 9th Division, not to block the road, but to dissolve into the tree line running parallel to it. The Soviets have brought tanks to a sniper fight, but the Soviets are not done. They are bringing something to the Raate Road that the Finns cannot stop. Thanks, thousands of them. As the engines of the lead vehicles sputter in the cold, fuel lines freezing, the first distinct crack of a Finnish rifle signals that the trap has been sprung. The Finns do not meet the Soviets on the road. They let them pass. Then, axes bite into birch trees. Timber crashes across the path. The column is trapped. The Finns have a word for this. Moti, firewood. The Soviets are about to be chopped into pieces and burned. At Suomussalmi, this tactic is executed with ruthless efficiency. Finnish ski troops, moving ghost-like through the timber, fell trees across the road to immobilize the Soviet convoy vehicles. The sound of axes biting into birch echoes through the forest, followed by the crash of timber across the frozen road. The Soviet column grinds to a halt. Once the column is halted, the massacre begins. Finnish snipers target the field kitchens and officers first. The acrid smell of cordite hangs in the air, mixing with the scent of pine resin and frozen blood. Soviet troops, terrified of the invisible enemy, dig into the snow, but the cold does not care about trenches. Men freeze in their foxholes, rifles clutched in stiff hands. Supplies dwindle. In one surreal engagement, known as the Sausage War, starving Soviet troops from the 718th Regiment overrun a Finnish field kitchen. Instead of pressing the attack, they stop to devour the pots of hot sausage soup. The steam rises from the pots, carrying the smell of meat and onions into the frigid air. The Finns regroup and neutralize the distracted Russians in a counterattack, a grim testament to the logistical collapse of the Red Army. Further south, along the Kolar River, the legend of the White Reaper is being written. Simo Häyhä, operating in the sector defended by the 6th Company of Infantry Regiment 34, turns the forest into a no-go zone. On December 21st, 1939, Häyhä achieved his personal record of 25 confirmed eliminations in a single day. He operates alone, moving before dawn to prepared positions. Each shot is deliberate. The metallic click of the bolt cycling, the brass casing ejecting into the snow, the body dropping in the distance. The Soviets, paralyzed by the accuracy of fire that seems to come from nowhere, deploy counter-snipers and concentrate artillery barrages on suspected coordinates. They tear up whole sections of the forest, splintering birch trees, cratering the snow, but Häyhä is already gone, vanished into the white. But rifles are not the only thing waiting in the trees. The Finns have brought something the Soviets have never seen before. The Suomi submachine weapon spits 70 rounds in 7 seconds. At 50 meters in the dense forest, it is not a weapon, it is an eraser. Soviet patrols vanish in bursts of sound and blood. The terror is amplified by the Finnish use of the Suomi KP/31 submachine weapon. In the dense forests, where visibility is often less than 50 meters, the high rate of fire of the Suomi allows Finnish squads to annihilate Soviet patrols in seconds. The staccato bursts echo through the trees, followed by the screams of the falling. The Soviet 163rd Division, trapped in the village of Suomussalmi, finds themselves besieged by a force they cannot see. But what the Soviets do not realize is that their nightmare is about to get worse. Despite these local successes, the sheer mass of the Soviet assault remains an existential threat. The 44th Division on Rata Road attempts to reinforce the crumbling 163rd. They possess overwhelming firepower, but the tanks are blind in the forest and their artillery has no targets. Finnish Colonel Silasvuo orders his men to cut the retreat route of the 44th, sealing the road at both ends. The commander of the Soviet 44th Division, Alexei Vinogradov, realizes too late that his elite mechanized unit is not a spearhead, but a target. With the road blocked and temperatures dropping to negative 30 degrees Celsius, the heavy engines of the tanks fall silent as fuel lines freeze. From the darkness of the surrounding woods, thousands of invisible eyes watch the stalled column. The order is given to the Finnish troops: no quarter. The 44th is to be liquidated. The first week of January 1940 witnessed scenes on the Rajate Road that defy comprehension. The Finnish 9th Division, outnumbered but tactically superior, slices the 44th Division into small motties. Then they extinguish them one by one. The Soviet soldiers, huddled around makeshift fires, are picked off by snipers who fire from the darkness. The crack of the rifle, the slump of the body, the hiss of blood freezing on the snow. Those who try to sleep freeze to their end, their bodies found in the morning curled in fetal positions, faces blue, eyes open. The smell of the fallen mingles with the scent of wood smoke and pine. When the Finns finally clear the road, they find a landscape of frozen horror. The bodies of thousands of Soviet soldiers lie rigid, hard as stone, often piled upon one another in grotesque tableaus. Arms are raised in futile gestures of defense. Mouths are open in silent screams. The 44th Division has effectively ceased to exist, suffering between 7,000 and 9,000 casualties compared to only 400 Finnish losses. The spoils of war are immense. 43 tanks, 71 field pieces, 260 trucks, and nearly 1,200 horses are captured, providing the material-starved Finnish army with a lifeline. The destruction is so total that Commander Vinogradov, who escapes the encirclement, is later executed by Stalin for his failure. The Finns have destroyed an entire division, but they are about to lose the war. Simultaneously, on the Karelian Isthmus, the war of attrition is entering its bloodiest phase. Frustrated by the humiliating defeats, Stalin replaces Voroshilov with Semyon Timoshenko and orders a change in tactics. The Red Army abandons complex maneuvers for brute force. They massed 600,000 men and thousands of artillery pieces against the Mannerheim Line. 600,000 men are about to slam into the Mannerheim Line, and this time, the Finns do not have enough bullets. The Suma miracle, where Finns held off tanks with logs and Molotov cocktails, begins to crack under a storm of steel. On February 1st, 1940, the Soviets fired 300,000 shells into the Finnish lines in 24 hours. The sound is indescribable, a continuous roar that obliterates thought, deafens ears, liquefies the ground. The terrain itself is reshaped. Bunkers are pulverized into rubble. Trenches become shallow graves filled with body parts and frozen mud. The Finnish defenders, awake for days and deafened by the barrage, face waves of Soviet infantry that advance regardless of casualties. The Finnish artillery, running critically low on shells, cannot answer. Men load the last rounds, knowing there will be no resupply. Drop a comment below. If you had to defend your homeland with bolt-action rifles against a million-man army, would you stand and fight or retreat into the wilderness? Simo Häyhä has eliminated 500 men. But the Soviets have figured out where he hides, and they are bringing artillery. In the Kolar sector, Simo Häyhä continues his one-man war, his elimination count surpassing 500. But on March 6th, the war finally finds him. An exploding bullet fired by a Soviet soldier strikes him in the jaw, tearing away half his face. The impact is catastrophic. Bone fragments, teeth, blood spray into the snow. He is evacuated, comatose, as the defensive lines begin to buckle across the entire front. By mid-February, the Mannerheim Line is breached at Suma. The Finnish army is not defeated in spirit, but it is exhausted of ammunition and men. The Soviets have learned their lesson and are now advancing with a steamroller of armor and artillery that no amount of sniper fire can halt. Marshal Mannerheim realizes the end is near. The road to Helsinki is opening. Simo Häyhä does not know that in 2 days, a Soviet bullet will take half his face. He does not know that the Mannerheim Line is about to shatter. He only knows that he has one more round in the chamber and one more target in his sights. Simo Häyhä wakes up on the day the war ends. Half his face is gone, held together with surgical wire. 500 men have fallen by his hand, but he doesn't remember firing the last shot. The silence that greets him is the silence of a ceasefire. Finland has survived. Barely. On March 13th, 1940, at 11 o'clock in the morning, a profound silence fell across the forests of Karelia. The Moscow Peace Treaty was signed the previous night. The sound of battle, which has been constant for 105 days, ceases. Simo Häyhä regains consciousness from his coma on the very day the conflict stops, awakening to a Finland that is still independent, but diminished. His face is a ruin, reconstructed by surgeons, a permanent reminder of the price paid. The price is steep. Finland surrenders a tenth of its land and its second largest city. Finland is forced to cede 9% of its territory, including the entire Karelian Isthmus and the city of Viipuri, Finland's second largest economic hub. 422,000 people refused to live under the Soviet flag and walk into exile, carrying their lives on sleds. This triggers a massive exodus. 422,000 Karelians, 12% of the country's population, abandon their homes instantly, refusing to live under Soviet rule. They leave behind only empty houses and scorched earth for the victors, carrying what they can on sleds and carts, moving in long columns through the snow toward an uncertain future. Yet, the Winter War massacre refers not to the Finnish defeat, but to the exorbitant price the Soviet Union pays for limited gains. Official figures released decades later by Russian historians confirm that the Red Army suffers approximately 126,875 to 167,976 irrecoverable losses, fallen or missing. Total casualties, including wounded and sick, reach nearly 321,000 to 381,000. By contrast, Finland loses approximately 25,904 men. For every Finnish soldier that fell, more than 5 Soviet soldiers perished. The White Reaper has claimed a toll that shakes the Kremlin. One Soviet general bitterly remarks, "We have won just enough ground to bury our fallen." But the real consequences are only beginning to unfold. The strategic reverberations of the war extend far beyond the frozen lakes of Finland. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler watches the Red Army struggle with keen interest. He interprets the Soviet difficulties, the poor logistics, the rigid command structure, and the catastrophic losses against a small foe, as proof that the Soviet Union is a colossus with feet of clay. This assessment directly encourages his decision to launch Operation Barbarossa the following year, a miscalculation that will ultimately doom the Third Reich. The ghost of the Winter War haunts the ruins of Stalingrad, the frozen corpses outside Moscow, the shattered panzers in the Kursk salient. The Winter War remains a definitive case study in asymmetric warfare, proving that terrain, technology, and the will to fight can bleed a superpower dry. The legacy of those 105 days is visible today, not just in the scars of the Karelian birch trees, but in the modern military doctrines of small nations facing giants. As the world watches new conflicts unfold in Eastern Europe, the ghost of the Finnish sniper in the white cape stands as a stark warning. Numbers alone do not guarantee victory, and the snow always remembers. The Winter War proved that the size of an army means nothing if the will to fight is absolute. If this story of 6,000 farmers holding off a superpower earned your respect, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The snow remembers. Make sure history does.